My name is Claire, I'm 41, and this story is about the night my daughter's 12th birthday turned into something I'll never forget. While balloons still hung in our kitchen, I discovered a secret that shattered the future we'd been saving for her. A betrayal that no mother should ever face. Stay with me as I tell you how it all began, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe for more family drama and stories of emotional courage. The kitchen still smelled of chocolate and vanilla when the last of the birthday guests left. Paper plates stacked in a leaning tower on the counter, ribbons curling on the floor, and a single pink balloon bobbing lazily against the ceiling fan. My daughter, Ava, had turned 12 that day. She was upstairs in her room, giggling softly as she reread the notes from her friends, her laughter carrying faintly through the old wooden floorboards. For a moment, I let myself breathe in the sight of her happiness. I'd worked so hard to make this day special, even with our limited budget. No fancy venues, no expensive gifts, just a homemade cake, a few decorations from the dollar store, and the kind of warmth money couldn't buy. I thought the night would end in peace. But life rarely waits until you're ready for its blows. I was rinsing cake crumbs from the serving knife when my husband, Mark, walked in. His shirt was wrinkled, and he still hadn't taken off his work shoes. He gave me a thin smile, the kind that never reached his eyes anymore. "Nice party," he muttered, dropping his phone onto the counter. "Yeah," I replied, forcing cheer into my voice. She really had a good time. But something felt off. He was restless, scrolling on his phone every few minutes during the party, hardly looking at Ava as she blew out her candles. Now, his shoulders seemed tense, his jaw clenched tight as though he were bracing for something. "Can you take out the trash?" I asked, just to break the silence. He grunted in reply, scooping up the bags and heading out the back door. That's when I saw it. The screen of his phone lit up with a notification, our bank app. A withdrawal alert. My eyes caught the numbers before I even realized what I was doing. The amount was so large, I froze. My heart dropped. It wasn't just any account. It was the one we had been building for Ava since she was a baby, the college savings we'd promised her. The knife slipped from my soapy hands into the sink with a loud clatter. I snatched the phone, my breath coming fast and uneven. I opened the app with trembling fingers, praying it was a mistake. But it wasn't. The balance stared back at me, nearly emptied. I leaned against the counter, the room suddenly too small, the walls pressing in. How could he? On her birthday, of all days. Memories flooded me, nights when I'd skipped buying new shoes so we could deposit a few more dollars, weeks when I'd stretched meals with casseroles and soups just to make that account grow. Every sacrifice, every compromise, every whispered promise to Ava about her future, it all flashed before my eyes, now reduced to almost nothing. I heard the back door creak open. Mark came in, shaking the cold air off his jacket. He didn't notice the phone in my hand right away. He just walked past me and opened the fridge, pulling out a beer like it was any other night. I wanted to scream, to throw the bottle across the room, to demand answers. But Ava's laughter floated down again from upstairs, innocent and pure. I couldn't ruin her night. Not yet. I set the phone down, quietly, like it burned. "Everything okay?" I asked, my voice steady but sharp underneath. He glanced over his shoulder, too casual. "Yeah. Why wouldn't it be?" I swallowed my words, forcing a smile I didn't feel. "Just checking." He didn't even look at me. He just popped the cap off the bottle and went into the living room, flipping on the TV as if nothing had changed. As if he hadn't just robbed his own daughter's dreams. Later that night, after Ava had gone to bed, I went into her room to tuck her in. She hugged me tightly, her hair still smelling faintly of frosting. "This was the best birthday, Mom," she whispered, half asleep. I smiled, brushing her hair back from her forehead. "I'm glad, sweetheart." But inside, I was breaking. I kissed her goodnight and stepped out, closing the door softly behind me. I stood there in the hallway, staring at the door, and I promised myself one thing: I wasn't going to let this betrayal slide. Not when it came to Ava. Downstairs, the house was quiet except for the hum of the TV. Mark had fallen asleep on the couch, the beer bottle balanced dangerously on the armrest. I looked at him, this man I had trusted, the father of my child, and all I felt was a cold, hollow ache. I tiptoed back to the kitchen and pulled out an old binder from the drawer. It was Ava's college folder, filled with bank statements, saving plans, even little notes Ava had scribbled about what she wanted to study one day. I flipped through it slowly, my hands shaking with both rage and grief. On one page, Ava had drawn a picture when she was 8, a stick figure of herself in a graduation cap, smiling. Above it, she'd written in big letters, "I will make Mom proud." Tears blurred my vision. That was the dream Mark had stolen. As the clock ticked past midnight, I sat at the table, staring at the evidence of betrayal in my hands. The party decorations still clung to the walls, but to me, they looked like ghosts of a celebration already ruined. I didn't know how yet, but I swore in that moment, I would find out where the money went, and I would make sure Ava's future wasn't destroyed by the man who was supposed to protect it. That night wasn't just my daughter's 12th birthday. It was the night I discovered the truth that would change everything. The silence after that night felt heavier than any argument. I woke early the next morning, not because I wanted to, but because sleep had abandoned me. The faint light of dawn seeped through the blinds as I stood in the kitchen, staring at the same decorations from Ava's party, now wilted and sagging. They felt like a cruel reminder of the celebration I had to fake while my world was quietly splitting apart. Mark shuffled in a little after 7, hair uncombed, shirt half tucked. He grabbed a mug and poured himself coffee like everything was perfectly normal. I watched him, searching his face for some trace of guilt. There was none. "Mark," I said carefully, "I checked the account last night." He froze for half a second, his back to me, before taking a slow sip. "And? The money's gone." My voice was calm, but my chest felt like it was on fire. He finally turned, setting the mug on the counter with a loud clink. "I told you, Claire, it's temporary. An emergency came up. I'll put it back." "What kind of emergency empties our daughter's college fund?" I asked, my tone sharper now. His jaw tightened, and he looked past me, not at me. "You wouldn't understand." That phrase cut deeper than anything else. You wouldn't understand. As if I hadn't carried this family through layoffs, late bills, and endless sacrifices. As if my entire life hadn't been built around understanding more than I ever wanted to. Ava padded into the kitchen, still in her pajamas, hair sticking up in soft tangles. "Morning," she yawned, sliding into a chair. The tension in the room was thick, but she didn't notice. I forced a smile. "Morning, sweetheart. Pancakes." Her eyes lit up, and she nodded. As I mixed the batter, Mark slipped out with his mug, heading upstairs without another word. The sound of the bedroom door shutting was louder than it should have been. For the next few days, the atmosphere inside the house shifted in ways only I seemed to notice. Mark stayed out later, coming home after Ava had gone to bed. He carried himself with an edge, like he was constantly on the defense. When he did talk, it was short, clipped, as though every word cost him too much effort. One evening, I decided to test him. I set 2 plates on the table, waiting for him to come down. Ava had finished her homework and was helping me with the salad. "Dad's late again," she muttered, pushing cherry tomatoes into the bowl. "He'll be here," I replied, though I wasn't sure. When Mark finally walked in, he reeked faintly of cologne, not the kind I ever bought him. He tossed his keys onto the counter, kissed Ava on the head, and sat down as though nothing was unusual. "You okay?" I asked casually, placing the food on the table. "Work's been rough," he said, too quickly. His eyes darted away. Ava studied him with a curiosity that made me uneasy. She was sharper than he gave her credit for. That night, after Ava went upstairs, I stood in the living room doorway and said quietly, "You're lying to me." He looked up from the TV, eyes narrowing. "Excuse me? I know you didn't use that money for an emergency. So tell me the truth." He leaned back, crossing his arms. "Claire, you're blowing this out of proportion. Do you really want to argue about money in front of Ava? Don't turn this around on me," I snapped. "This isn't about arguing. It's about trust." His lips pressed into a thin line. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, he muttered, "Drop it, Claire. It's handled." But nothing was handled. The cracks were widening, and I could feel them spreading under our feet. Over the next week, I noticed the little things Ava picked up on. She asked why Dad didn't sit with us at dinner anymore, why he spent so much time on his phone, why he seemed angry when no one had done anything wrong. I tried to shield her, brushing off her questions with gentle excuses. But Ava wasn't buying it. One evening, she lingered in the hallway as I folded laundry. "Mom," she asked softly. "Yes, honey. Did I do something wrong? Is that why Dad's mad all the time?" The words hit me like a punch to the chest. I knelt down, holding her shoulders. "No, baby. This has nothing to do with you. You are the best thing in my life, and don't you ever forget it." She nodded, but her eyes carried the kind of sadness no 12-year-old should carry. A few nights later, I was washing dishes when I heard a muffled voice from the den. Mark was on the phone. His tone was low, urgent. "I told you I'd take care of it." "No, she doesn't know. I'll get the rest soon." My hands froze in the soapy water. He was talking to someone he didn't want me to know about. The floor creaked behind me, and I turned to see Ava standing there in her socks, eyes wide. She had heard it too. I shook my head quickly, silently urging her not to make a sound. She tiptoed back to her room, and I stood there, gripping the edge of the sink until my knuckles went white. That night, lying awake, I stared at the ceiling, listening to Mark's even breathing beside me. My heart raced with a mix of dread and determination. The lies were no longer hidden in shadows. They were seeping into the open, staining every corner of our home. I thought of Ava, her questions, her sadness, her growing awareness of the cracks behind our closed doors. I wanted to shield her forever, but children see more than we realize. She was already piecing together truths I wished she didn't have to know. And though I didn't yet have the full picture, I knew one thing with absolute certainty: the man lying next to me was no longer the man I thought I married. The cracks weren't just in the marriage anymore. They were in the walls of our home, in the laughter that had grown quieter, in the future that no longer felt secure. And those cracks were spreading fast. The cracks had spread so far I could almost hear them in the silence of the house. But what unsettled me most wasn't Mark's lies or his distance, it was the way Ava began to move differently through our home. She wasn't loud anymore, not with her questions, not with her laughter. Instead, she watched. One evening, I found her at the dining table, bent over a notebook. Her brow was furrowed, lips pursed in concentration. When I asked about her homework, she quickly closed it, tucking the book beneath a stack of papers. "Just math," she said with a shrug. But the way she avoided my eyes told me it wasn't. Over the next few days, I noticed the small things. Ava lingered near the den when Mark took calls. She pressed closer to me in the kitchen whenever I tried to ignore the tension that clung to the air. She started keeping a small backpack near her desk, its zipper slightly open as if she'd been hiding something inside. I didn't press her. Not yet. One Saturday morning, as sunlight spilled across the kitchen floor, I caught her studying Mark's phone while he was out of the room. She didn't touch it, just stared, her jaw tight, as though memorizing every detail. When she saw me watching, her cheeks flushed pink. "Mom, if someone did something wrong, would you tell?" Her voice was careful, low. "Always," I said gently, setting my coffee down. "The truth matters, Ava. Even when it's hard." She nodded, thoughtful, before slipping away upstairs. That night, as Mark pretended to watch television, Ava crawled into my bed after he'd fallen asleep. Her small hands clutched her notebook. "Don't be mad," she whispered, opening it. Inside were neat columns and scribbled notes. At first glance, it looked like the work of a child playing detective. But as I flipped through, my throat tightened. She had drawn arrows, written dates, and copied numbers, account balances, times Mark came home late, even fragments of conversations she'd overheard. "Ava, where did you get this?" I asked, my voice trembling. Her eyes welled, but she didn't look away. "I saw him talking on the phone. He said you didn't know. And then I heard him tell someone he used money. So I started writing it down. Just in case." My heart ached. My little girl, only 12, carrying a burden far too heavy. I wrapped my arms around her. "Sweetheart, this isn't your job. You shouldn't have to. But if I don't, he'll keep lying to you, she interrupted, her voice fierce through the tears. Her words pierced me with a clarity I hadn't had for weeks. From then on, Ava worked quietly, carefully. She didn't confront Mark, never gave him a reason to suspect her. Instead, she became almost invisible, slipping into rooms unnoticed, listening when no one realized she was there. One evening, I caught her whispering into our old computer, typing furiously. "What are you doing?" I asked softly, leaning against the doorframe. She bit her lip. "I'm learning how to find things online. Like where money goes. I think Dad's sending it somewhere." The determination in her voice was both heartbreaking and astonishing. I wanted to stop her, to pull her away from the screen, but part of me couldn't. She wasn't just curious, she was determined to protect me, to protect us. "Promise me you'll be careful," I said, brushing her hair back. "I promise. But I'm not giving up," she whispered. The real turning point came on a school night when Mark was upstairs taking another hushed call. Ava sat beside me on the couch, notebook in hand. "Mom," she said quietly, "do you know what Zelle is?" I blinked, surprised. "It's a way to send money." She flipped to a page covered in messy notes. "I heard him say it last week. He spelled it out when he was giving someone instructions. I looked it up at school." My pulse quickened. "Ava, you can't." "I didn't do anything wrong," she insisted, her voice steady. "But if he's sending money to someone, that's where it's going." The weight of her discovery settled between us. She was piecing together a puzzle adults would have struggled with. 4 days after, she became even more deliberate. She asked to stay up late to read, but I'd find her by the staircase, listening. She doodled less in her sketchbooks and instead filled pages with questions, timelines, arrows that connected things I hadn't dared to connect myself. Her quiet plan wasn't reckless, it was strategic. She knew she couldn't confront him outright, so she built her case slowly, with the kind of patience only a child masking heartbreak could summon. One evening, I noticed she had placed her backpack by the front door before bed. "Going somewhere?" I teased, trying to lighten the mood. She looked at me seriously. "If things get worse, we need to be ready." Her words sent a chill through me. The most haunting moment came late one night when I found her sitting at her desk, tears glistening on her cheeks but her pencil moving steadily. "Ava," I whispered, kneeling beside her. "What's wrong?" She slid the paper toward me. It wasn't numbers this time, it was a letter. "If you ever feel like you can't stay, Mom, don't worry about me. I'll go with you. We don't need Dad if he's not honest." The handwriting wobbled with emotion, but the message was unshakable. I hugged her, fighting my own tears. "You're just a child. You shouldn't be planning these things." "But I am," she said firmly. "Because someone has to." And in that moment, I realized, Ava wasn't just protecting me. She was preparing for a truth neither of us could avoid much longer. The cracks in our home had forced her into silence, but in that silence, she was building strength. Quietly, carefully, Ava was shaping a plan that might just change everything. And though I wished with every fiber of me that she didn't have to, I knew her resolve was stronger than Mark ever imagined. She was my daughter, and she wasn't going to let the lies win. The letter Ava had written still sat folded in my dresser drawer, its words etched into my heart. I couldn't look at her the same way anymore. My little girl had turned into someone who carried secrets too heavy for her young shoulders. And yet, I knew she was right. Something had to break. Something had to be said. That opportunity came sooner than I expected. Mark suggested we invite his parents over for dinner the following weekend. He pitched it like he was doing me a favor. "It'll be good for Ava to see her grandparents," he said casually, pouring himself a drink. His tone was light, but his eyes didn't quite meet mine. I wanted to say no, to avoid the suffocating weight of pretending everything was fine, but Ava's sharp glance from across the room stopped me. She was quiet, but her look said it all. This is our chance. So I agreed. Sure. Dinner. The night of the dinner, the house smelled of roasted chicken and garlic bread. I busied myself in the kitchen, my hands moving on autopilot, though my stomach twisted with unease. Ava flitted between the living room and dining table, setting out plates with unusual precision. Every fork was perfectly aligned. Every glass shone as though she'd polished them twice. "Sweetheart, it doesn't have to be perfect," I told her, watching her fuss with the napkins. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "It does tonight." The conviction in her voice unsettled me. By the time Mark's parents arrived, the atmosphere was already taut. His mother swept in with her usual perfume cloud, kissing Ava's forehead and patting my cheek as if we were all characters in a sitcom. His father, quieter, gave me a brief nod before settling into his seat. Mark, of course, played the perfect host. He poured wine, cracked jokes, and wore that easy grin I'd once fallen in love with but now barely recognized. Dinner began like any other family meal. His mother gushed about her garden, his father asked Ava about school, and Mark dominated the conversation with stories from work. I tried to play along, though my fork barely touched my plate. Then it happened. Ava, sitting straight-backed between her grandparents, folded her napkin carefully and looked across the table at her father. "Dad," she said softly, "how much does college cost?" The question dropped like a stone in water. Mark chuckled nervously. "Well, that depends on the school." "Why do you ask, kiddo?" "Because," she replied, her voice steady, "I heard you say you used my college fund. For someone else." The room froze. Mark's fork clattered against his plate. His mother blinked in confusion, glancing between us. "What's she talking about?" I felt my pulse pound in my ears. Ava's eyes didn't waver. She was calm, too calm for a 12-year-old making such a bold accusation. Mark forced a laugh. "Ava, that's ridiculous. Where did you get that idea?" Her hand slid under the table. I knew what she was doing, reaching for her notebook. She pulled it out and laid it on the table, the pages fanned open like evidence in a trial. Her neat columns of dates, times, and notes were there for everyone to see. "I wrote it all down," she said, her voice unwavering. "Every time you came home late. Every time you sent money. Even the names you said on the phone." His father leaned forward, squinting at the page. His mother gasped, hand flying to her chest. Mark's face flushed crimson. This is nonsense," he stammered, flipping the notebook shut with a snap. "But Ava wasn't finished. You told someone on the phone, she'll never know." "But I heard you." "Mom might not have, but I did." The silence that followed was deafening. Mark's mother looked at me, eyes wide with betrayal. "Is this true?" I opened my mouth, but Ava beat me to it. "He used the money, Grandma. The money for my school. He gave it to another woman." Her words cracked through the room like thunder. Mark slammed his hand on the table. "Enough. You're a child. You don't understand." But the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Ava's chin lifted, tears glistening but unshed. "I understand more than you think." His father leaned back, arms crossed, staring at his son with a mixture of disappointment and disgust. "Mark, tell me she's lying." But Mark couldn't. His mouth opened, then closed again. His silence was louder than any confession. The dinner spiraled into chaos. His mother demanded answers, her voice shrill with shock. His father's disappointment cut sharper than any yell. "You stole from your own daughter?" he asked quietly, shaking his head. Mark tried to defend himself, stumbling over excuses about temporary loans and misunderstandings, but no one was buying it. I sat frozen, my heart torn between fury and sorrow, watching my daughter stand taller than her years, her small hands clenched into fists on the table. At one point, Mark turned his anger on me. "You put her up to this, didn't you? You poisoned her against me." I met his eyes, my voice calm but firm. "No, Mark." She saw the truth all on her own. The meal sat untouched. The chicken grew cold. The garlic bread hardened. But none of us cared. Ava had ripped the facade wide open, exposing what we'd all been too afraid or too blind to confront. By the time his parents left, his mother was in tears, muttering about shame and disgrace, while his father barely said a word to him, only placing a heavy hand on Ava's shoulder as if to say you did the right thing. When the door closed behind them, the house felt eerily quiet. Mark stood in the dining room, fists clenched, face pale. But Ava walked over to me, slipping her small hand into mine. "We're not crazy," she whispered. He really did it. I hugged her tightly, my chest heaving with the weight of everything that had just unfolded. For the first time in months, I didn't feel alone. That night, I lay awake replaying every detail of the dinner, the shock in his parents' eyes, the venom in his voice, the courage in Ava's. The truth was out now. And nothing in our home would ever be the same again. That night after the dinner, the house felt different. The air was heavy, not just with silence but with something final, like a door had shut and there was no going back. Mark had stormed into the bedroom, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled, while Ava and I sat curled up on the living room couch. Her small hand stayed wrapped in mine, steadying me more than I could ever admit. When she finally drifted to sleep against my shoulder, I carried her to bed, brushing the hair from her forehead and whispering a promise. We're going to be okay, Ava. We'll find a way forward. For the first time in years, I believed my own words. The following morning, I woke to the faint clinking of dishes. Ava was in the kitchen, pouring cereal into 2 bowls. Her hair was messy, and she still wore her pajama shirt, but she looked determined. Breakfast is ready, she announced, sliding a bowl toward me as if she'd been doing this for years. I smiled through the ache in my chest. You don't have to take care of me, sweetheart. She met my eyes seriously. Yes, I do. We have to take care of each other now. Her words, so simple, pressed deeper than any lecture or advice could. That week blurred into a string of hard decisions. I contacted a lawyer recommended by a neighbor, and though the process was daunting, I felt a flicker of strength each time I signed a paper with my name. Ava sat nearby during those appointments, doodling quietly in her notebook, but every so often she'd look up and give me an encouraging smile. Mark tried to apologize at first, his words syrupy, his tone practiced. He claimed it was a mistake, that he had every intention of paying back the money, that we could move past this. But his apologies rang hollow, echoing against the walls that Ava and I had already begun tearing down in our hearts. One evening, when he tried cornering me in the kitchen, Ava walked in and planted herself between us. Her voice was small but unshakable. Stop yelling at Mom. The room went quiet. It wasn't a dramatic fight, no slammed doors or screaming matches, but in that moment, the balance shifted. I wasn't alone anymore. A few weeks later, Mark packed a suitcase and left. The sound of the door shutting behind him was softer than I'd expected, almost anticlimactic. No shouting. No scene. Just silence. Ava and I stood in the middle of the living room, staring at the empty space where his shoes usually Saturday. She tugged at my sleeve. Does this mean it's just us now? Yes, I whispered, pulling her into my arms. Just us. And that's enough. Rebuilding wasn't easy. Bills piled up, and there were nights I sat at the kitchen table with my head in my hands, wondering how I would stretch every dollar. But Ava had a way of grounding me. She suggested small changes, canceling cable, cooking more meals at home, even hosting a yard sale where she proudly sold old toys and clothes she had long outgrown. It's not about money, she explained, sorting books into a cardboard box. It's about starting fresh. Her optimism rubbed off on me. Slowly, the house began to feel lighter, not because we had more, but because we had less of what weighed us down. One Saturday, Ava tugged me toward the library. She had discovered a scholarship board pinned near the entrance, with colorful flyers advertising opportunities for kids who worked hard. Look, Mom, she said, her eyes sparkling. I don't need Dad's money. I can earn my own future. I blinked back tears, tracing the edges of the flyer with my fingertips. It was such a simple piece of paper, yet it held more hope than any bank account ever could. From that day on, the library became our second home. Ava dove into her studies with a fierceness I hadn't seen before, while I picked up part-time work helping with after-school programs. We weren't rich, not by a long shot, but we were steady. We were moving forward. Neighbors noticed the change, too. Mrs. Carter next door started dropping by with homemade casseroles, insisting, every little bit helps. Mr. Nguyen from down the street fixed the leak under our sink, waving away my protests with a kind smile. Support came from unexpected corners. At church, Ava shared her story during a youth group meeting, not the painful details, just enough to show her resilience. People clapped. Some cried. That night, she walked taller, her chin high, her eyes bright with pride. Watching her, I realized something. Ava wasn't just surviving. She was thriving. And in her growth, I found my own strength. Months passed, and our lives settled into a new rhythm. We still had rough days, nights when loneliness crept in, mornings when money felt too tight, but the cracks were slowly filling with something stronger than before. One evening, while washing dishes, I caught Ava humming to herself at the table, her head bent over a science project. The glow of the lamp lit her face, and I felt an ache of gratitude so sharp it nearly buckled me. "You're amazing, you know that?" I said softly. She glanced up, cheeks pink. "I'm just doing my best." "That's more than enough," I whispered. As spring arrived, we planted a small garden in the backyard. It wasn't much, just tomatoes, peppers, and a few herbs, but Ava treated each seed as if it were a promise. We knelt side by side in the dirt, our hands messy, our laughter unburdened. "This is ours," she said proudly, brushing soil from her palms. "No one can take it away." Her words echoed in my heart. For the first time in a long while, I believed them. The true rebuilding wasn't about money or lost savings. It was about trust. It was about the bond between mother and daughter, tested but unbroken. One night, as I tucked Ava into bed, she grabbed my hand. "Mom." "Yes, sweetheart. Even if things get hard again, we'll still be okay, right?" I leaned down, kissing her forehead. "Yes, Ava. Because we have each other. And that's stronger than anything." She smiled sleepily, her eyes fluttering shut. And in that quiet moment, I knew we weren't just surviving anymore. We were rebuilding. Brick by brick. Dream by dream. Together.